What if you could find a new game that gives you that same Rise of Kingdoms feeling all over again? That mix of base building, real time marches, alliance teamwork, and map wide power struggles is hard to replace. But there are still a few games that get pretty close, and some of them even bring their own spin to the formula. Today, we're going through the 10 best games like Rise of Kingdoms. Let's get into it. At number 10, we have Land of Empires Immortal. This one sticks pretty close to the core loop that Rise of Kingdoms players already know. You rebuild your city, grow your economy, train troops, collect heroes, and send marches out onto a persistent world map for resources, monsters, and PvP fights. What helps it stand out a bit is that it mixes in a lot of PvE content too. So it is not just about waiting for alliance wars or getting dragged into kingdom politics all the time. You also get demon invasions, world bosses, ruin fights, and other events that break up the normal routine. It does not feel as big or as polished as some of the stronger games higher on this list, but it still gives you that familiar build, march, and rally rhythm. So if you want a fantasy strategy game that feels close to Rise of Kingdoms without being too complicated, Land of Empires is a decent place to start. At number 9, we have Lords Mobile Kingdom Wars. The main reason it belongs on this list is that it still delivers a lot of the things Rise of Kingdoms players usually want. You build up your base, train armies, collect heroes, join a guild, and take part in kingdom wars, rallies, and map pressure that can go on for a long time. What makes it a little different is that it leans harder into heroes and base progression than Rise of Kingdoms does, so it is not the cleanest one-to-one match. But the large-scale guild warfare is still a huge part of the appeal, and because the game has been around for so long, it has that feeling of a very established war game with a lot going on. So if you want something big, active, and packed with guild conflict, Lords Mobile still deserves a spot in the conversation. At number 8, we have Lord of Seas, Survival, and War. This one takes the whole Rise of Kingdoms style and moves it into a pirate and naval setting. Instead of marching across land with armies, you are sailing across an open ocean map with fleets. You build and upgrade your island port, collect ships, recruit captains, and fight for control with your alliance. That theme shift is really the main reason to try it. It still has the real-time map pressure, the daily territory fighting, the rallies, and the constant sense that something is happening somewhere on the server. But the fleet combat gives it a different feel right away. It also helps that there is PvE content mixed in through treasure hunts and sea monster fights, so the game is not only about player wars. If you like the alliance-heavy side of Rise of Kingdoms but want something less medieval and more pirate-themed, this is a pretty fun alternative. At number 7, we have Guns of Glory Lost Island. This one keeps the same Broad Kingdom war structure, but swaps the usual ancient setting for muskets, cannons, and a bit of steampunk. You build up your estate, train armies, research upgrades, and work with your alliance for rallies, sieges, and map control. So right away, it feels familiar. What gives it more personality is the airship system. That is the part that makes the game feel less like just another copy. Your airship works almost like a signature power unit for your marches, and building it up adds another layer to how your army works. The Lost Island content also gives it more variety with PvP and PvE events, treasure-focused systems, and regular updates that keep things moving. It is still very much a timer-based alliance strategy game at heart. But if you want that same Rise of Kingdoms style in a more gunpowder-focused world, Guns of Glory is worth a look. At number 6, we have Infinity Kingdom. This is one of the lighter and more colorful games on the list, but do not let that fool you. Under that bright look, it still has a lot of the same things Rise of Kingdoms players usually like. You build your city, grow your economy, send marches onto a shared world map, and work with your alliance in big events and wars. The big difference here is the hero side of the game. Instead of mostly focusing on troop types and march size, Infinity Kingdom leans much harder into team building. You collect immortals from history and myth, pair them with elemental dragons, and start building lineups around synergy encounters. That gives the game a more hero-driven rhythm than Rise of Kingdoms. And for a lot of players, that is exactly the appeal. It still has the long-term alliance coordination and the map pressure, but your team setup feels more personal. So if you like Rise of Kingdoms but want more hero collecting, more lineup building, and a less serious visual style, Infinity Kingdom is a strong pick. At number 5, we have Whiteout Survival. If you've seen the ads, this pick might surprise you, but the actual game looks nothing like the ads. What you really get is a mix of survival city building and large scale alliance strategy. You are not only upgrading buildings and training troops, you are also trying to keep a frozen settlement alive. And that means assigning survivors to jobs, keeping the furnace running, dealing with morale, and slowly rebuilding your base in a brutal setting. That survival layer gives the game a very different feel from Rise of Kingdoms. But once you get onto the shared map, the familiar parts come back. You still gather resources, hunt enemies, join an alliance, launch rallies, and fight for territory. It also helps that Whiteout Survival has a lot of active event cycles, so there is usually something pushing the server forward. So if you want a game that still has the alliance warfare and long-term growth of Rise of Kingdoms, but with a colder and more survival-focused identity, this is one of the stronger options out there. At number 4, we have Age of Empires Mobile. This is one of the easiest games to put on this list because the fit makes sense almost right away. You build up your city, grow your forces, join an alliance, and fight over territory on a large shared map. So the core appeal is already there. What makes it stand out is that it brings that formula into the Age of Empires world. That gives it a stronger empire building feel than some of the other games here. There's a bit more of that classic civilization fantasy, where you feel like you are growing a nation instead of just upgrading a mobile base. It also helps that the game has big name recognition, so even people who have never touched it before can understand the vibe very quickly. It is not a perfect one-to-one copy of Rise of Kingdoms, but it does a very good job of hitting the same build, ally, and conquer loop, while wrapping it in a more familiar historical strategy, identity. So if you want something that feels close to Rise of Kingdoms but with a stronger Empire theme, Age of Empires Mobile is a very solid pick. At number 3, we have Warpath, a shooter. This one keeps a lot of the same real-time strategy DNA, but changes the whole setting to modern military warfare. So instead of ancient commanders and kingdoms, you are building a forward base, collecting officers, and fielding armies made up of tanks, infantry, artillery, aircraft, and even naval forces later on. That alone gives it a much different vibe. But the reason it ranks this high is because the map game still feels very close to what Rise of Kingdoms players tend to enjoy. You relocate your base, fight over cities and resource points, coordinate with your alliance, and take part in large map campaigns where timing and teamwork matter. It also has a lot more unit tuning than some of the other games on this list. So if you enjoy adjusting builds, fine-tuning your roster, and getting into the details of how your forces work, Warpath gives you more to play with. If you want the same alliance-driven pressure and world map fighting, but in a modern war setting instead of a historical one, Warpath is one of the best choices. At number 2, we have Era of Conquest. This one feels like a very serious attempt to give players that Rise of Kingdom style on a much bigger battlefield. You build your city, join global alliances, march in real time across a huge world, and fight for control over territory as your kingdom pushes toward long-term goals. So far, that all sounds familiar. What really pushes it this high is how battle-heavy it feels. The game puts a lot of focus on large-scale warfare, fast re-entry into combat, and less downtime between fights. That matters a lot in games like this, because one of the fastest ways to kill the momentum is being stuck waiting too long after every clash. Era of Conquest also feels a bit less tied to some of the usual pay pressure systems that turn people away from this genre. That makes the strategy side feel more important. So if you like the big alliance wars, the open world marches, and the kingdom scale tension of Rise of Kingdoms, but want a game that feels more battle focused and a bit fairer in how it handles progression, Era of Conquest is a great pick. And finally, at number 1, we have Call of Dragons. This is probably the easiest recommendation for Rise of Kingdoms players. And the reason is simple. It comes from the same creators, and you can feel that right away. The core loop is very familiar. You build up your city, uncover the map, gather resources, level heroes, join alliances, and take part in major territorial wars. So, if what you really want is that same kind of long term coordination and map control, Call of Dragons hits the mark almost immediately. But it also does it differently enough to avoid feeling like a simple reskin. The fantasy setting gives it more visual variety. The world itself feels more alive. Terrain matters more. Flying units change movement options, and the behemoth fights give alliances big shared targets to rally around. It also leans harder into cinematic battles and hero driven combat, which makes the action side feel more dramatic than Rise of Kingdoms. So, if you want the closest overall match, but with a fantasy twist and a bit more spectacle, Call of Dragons is probably the first game you should try. So, those are my picks for the 10 best games like Rise of Kingdoms. If you want the closest overall feel, start with Call of Dragons. If you want bigger battlefield pressure and less downtime, go with Era of Conquest. If you want a stronger empire building identity, Age of Empires Mobile is a very good option. And if you want that same alliance warfare in a modern military setting, Warpath is another easy recommendation. Let me know in the comments which one you think deserves the top spot. And if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more strategy game content.